So we've just about ready to pull the transmission out, and in order to do so, we need to move the swing arm back, and in this case, we're just going to remove the swing arm. To do that, you need a 27mm socket to loosen the lock nut. Now on the /5 and /6 models, the opening is very, very small. So we've got these 27mm sockets which we turn down the outside diameter so that they fit inside the hole. So I'm going to use that tool now to break. There we go, loosen that. And then using a 6mm Allen, insert that into the swing arm pivot and simply unscrew it. And then repeat that on the other side. And now Edward will take the swing arm out.
Look at that.
Awesome, beautiful. The next thing you need to do to remove the gearbox is to take the clutch actuation arm off out of the way, because it's just a lot easier, if not necessary, to do so. There's a little clip in here you need to remove, then the pin will come out. Hopefully it's not stuck in there too hard, and of course disconnect the clutch cable, and then the actuation rod will come out. Then the gearbox is almost ready to fall out of the bike. That's the little clip that's holding the pin in. And then you push the pin through, take it out. You can unhook the cable and remove the rod and spring. And take the piston out too at this point in time. Always check the bearing race to make sure it's not pitted. This one looks okay. One more bolt. Okay, all the bolts are out. Cable's disconnected. Push rod's out. Now we got to pull the gearbox out, but then we got to still have one more thing to do, and that's going to be to disconnect the neutral switch. So just carefully rotate the gearbox like so you can get underneath and take the wires off. And there we have it. Yeah, it's a good thing we're doing this. This thing hasn't been apart in a long time.
1984 was that clutch was made.
Okay.
Right, that's the 84 on it right there.
Trip out. Okay, well it might not.
Right, 08, 84, 06, 84.
Yeah, so it's been replaced at some point. You can also see this is the newer style than it probably originally had. So first I'm just loosening all of the 6 clutch bolts. Okay, and then I'm going to remove 3 of them to start with. 3 opposites, like so, and leave 3 in place, like the shape of a Mercedes star. These are the original BMW factory tools used for installing and removing the clutch on up to 1980 Boxers. We offer the same tools. The only difference, as you can see here, is they have a hex head instead of a wing nut, but otherwise they are identical and they work just great. These tools will allow you to release the clutch evenly, and they're even more important when you go to install. But I like to use them taking it apart too, especially in this case because the clutch may not be in that bad a shape and we don't want to put any undue stress on it by just popping it off. So you simply screw the tools in. And then you run the outer nuts in, just finger tight is all you need to do. And next you can then remove the other 3 bolts. Okay, I'm just gonna now turn each one of these a few turns, kind of a little bit at a time each one, and then release the tension on this clutch spring. And now we're loose enough to where the tools can be backed off. But we're going to just kind of be mindful of how this comes apart. Okay, so just the last tool out, and then the clutch assembly will come out. Here we go. Now those tools I just used, those are only necessary on models up to 1980. From 81 on, they redesigned the clutch and you don't need something like this. Okay, so now that the clutch is out, we're going to remove the flywheel so we can get in there and clean all this grime up and replace the rear main seal, the oil pump, O-ring, and just see how everything's going. So there's a couple of really important things to know about this. When you take the flywheel off, it's imperative that you locate the crank, or the crank has to be pushed back in some fashion so that it can't slide forward. So the way that I have been doing it for years, and what works well for me, is just simply a crate strap. So I put an Allen socket, 6mm, in the end of the alternator, which is the crankshaft, and loop the strap around the frame so it goes over twice, and just pull on it really tight. And now this thing's not going anywhere. It's very, very effective. Okay, now time for another special tool. This tool will allow you to lock the flywheel so you can get the bolts out. Okay, so this special tool is simply attached to the flywheel using 2 of the clutch bolts that you used to hold the clutch in. Now you'll be able to loosen the 5 flywheel bolts without the engine turning. Okay, so with the tool installed, I'm just going to crack these bolts loose. Now the tool can be removed. Okay, I'm going to double check my strap, make sure nothing moved, which it didn't. And now, very important, I'm going to set the motor to top dead center before I take the flywheel off. And that's visible when the OT mark is showing in the window. So now we're all set. Straps on, bolts are loose, set to OT. Now we can remove these bolts. Okay, so sometimes these come right out, sometimes you have to use a puller. This one looks like it's going to cooperate. And there we have it, flywheel. So on this R90/6 that we were working on, you can see how the flywheel came out pretty easily. I was able to just rock it out. The reason for that is that this is an older model that does not have an O-ring in the middle. around this in this area here. In 76 and later models have an O-ring, so it can be a little bit more difficult sometimes to get the flywheel out. There's a special tool from BMW, which basically you can see how that would work. You turn the nuts and using this bridge, it'll pull the flywheel off. So now that you know what that looks like, you can also, if you have a set of our clutch tools, then you could easily fabricate something out of a piece of bar, something that sits across like that, and screw these in. And essentially, with the clutch tools, you've also got a flywheel removal tool. All you need to do is add a piece of steel bar, which you might have laying around somewhere. Kind of looking for really bad teeth from the starter. These are kind of worn but serviceable. Also looking for a good non-pitted thrust bearing surface. This one looks good. And this is the area that the seal rides on. We'll clean it up and have a better look, but at first glance, looks completely serviceable. And so now, the next thing we're going to do is replace the main seal. And you see here is that thrust washer. This one actually came off. Now this one's not so bad because you can get to it. It sits on 2 pins. This one you can get to. The problem is the one on the other side. You can't get to that one. So if the crank were to slide forward for any reason, that little shim, that thrust washer could drop off the pins, and the only way that you'll get it back on those pins again is to take the complete engine apart. So that you want to avoid. That's why the strap trick is so important. But now we can work not disturb the rotational position of the crankshaft so that we get the flywheel on the same way with the OT in the window. A lot of cleanup work to do here to get it looking nice before we put all that together, but that's what we're going to start on next.